You know that feeling. You want to really grasp a complex situation, but without getting totally bogged down in, like, endless details.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's pretty much what we're trying to do today. We're going to dive into what's been happening recently around Cracolândia in São Paulo.
Ah, okay.
And the different reactions we're seeing, especially about this alleged disappearance of people and, well, how different groups are responding.
And what's interesting here, I think, is the source material we're using. It's not your typical academic stuff, right?
No, exactly.
We're looking at commentary from a media host, various social media influencers, and also activists who are actually there on the ground.
Right. So it should give us a pretty, well, multifaceted view of things.
Definitely. Multiple angles.
Yeah. And just to be clear, our aim isn't to pick sides or anything. It's really just to unpack these different viewpoints.
Understand the underlying issues.
Exactly. Things like public health, the ethics around online influence, which is huge right now, and social activism in this particular situation.
Okay, sounds good. Where do we start?
Right. Let's get into it. First up, there's this influencer, Felca, who made a pretty big decision.
Ah, yes, Felca. He apparently turned down, what was it, a huge offer.
Massive.
Yeah.
Are $50 million, reportedly, to promote betting sites.
Wow, 50 million. That number alone just shows you the scale of this online betting world.
It really does. And the kind of ethical spots influencers can find themselves in.
For sure. And his reason for saying no.
Well, apparently he's just against these platforms generally. And he mentioned his audience being quite young, so it positions him as, acting on principle.
Okay, so he didn't just refuse the money, he had something more to say.
Oh, yeah. He was quite critical of the CPI, that's the Parliamentary Inquiry Commission, looking into betting in Brazil.
Right. What was his take?
He felt it just wasn't serious enough. He described it almost like a group of friends joking around. His words, not mine.
Okay. So, trivializing a serious issue, in his view.
It seems like it. And he really connects that perceived lack of seriousness to the actual harm gambling addiction causes.
That's a crucial link. He talked about ludomania.
Exactly. He pointed out it's a serious public health issue. The WHO recognizes it as a mental disorder.
Affecting the brain's reward system, right? Similar to chemical dependency.
Yes, leading to that compulsive behavior, even when things are going badly. It's not just like a harmless hobby for everyone involved.
No, definitely not. That distinction is critical.
And he had this analogy that honestly really hit home for me.
Oh, yeah? What was it?
He said, cigarettes promise and deliver. Gambling sometimes only promises.
Ooh, that's sharp. It captures that sort of illusion of the win, doesn't it?
It really does. And then he went into the actual consequences he sees. Social isolation, families breaking down,
right.
People using not just their own money, but borrowing, getting into massive debt, even bankruptcy.
Wow. And did he mention specific groups being more vulnerable?
He did, yeah. He specifically raised concerns about adolescents being particularly susceptible to these harms.
Which really brings us back to the responsibility of influencers, especially those with younger followers.
Absolutely. And his suggestion for the CPI was quite dramatic.
What did he suggest?
He said they should put someone actually suffering from gambling addiction right next to a big influencer like Virginia Fonseca at the hearing.
Whoa, that's a powerful image.
Isn't it, just to visually show the real human cost that can get lost in all the, glamour and endorsements?
Yeah, it makes it very concrete, very confronting.
It's a chilling idea, really. And he didn't mince words when talking about influencers who do promote betting.
Okay.
He said very directly something like, Virginia, the money you receive from the gambling contract is paid with blood.
Paid with blood. That's incredibly strong language.
It is. Clearly, he feels very strongly, and it seems based on data he's seen.
And did he share any of that data, the stats?
He did. And they're pretty startling. A 194% increase in people seeking treatment for gambling addiction between 2018 and 2023.
Over 1,000% increase. That's staggering.
It is. And financially, 63% of gamblers in Brazil apparently have compromised income because of it.
Meaning they're cutting back on essentials.
Yeah, like clothes, 23% cutback there, and even food, 19%. It paints a really bleak picture of the real-world impact.
It really does. You see the tangible negatives right there.
He also made a point about how these platforms are designed, specifically to appeal to lower-income groups, like classes C and D.
How so?
Using mobile-friendly vertical formats. He mentioned O Tigrinho, the little tiger game, specifically.
Ah, okay. So very accessible, almost gamified, targeted.
Seems like a deliberate strategy, yeah, to reach a wider and maybe more vulnerable audience.
And you connect that to smartphones being everywhere. It makes sense how pervasive it can become. He also mentioned the choice of influencers, right?
Yeah, he observed that the influencers picked often have audiences largely in those same socioeconomic groups. It just reinforces that targeted approach.
Okay. So how did he wrap up his points?
With a pretty strong call to action, actually, urging the public to actively seek out and engage with content that denounces these practices.
And to question their own favorite influencers.
Exactly. He basically said the whole, oh, I didn't know, I just promoted it, excuse doesn't fly anymore.
Right. Taking responsibility.
Yeah. And he drew a parallel to banning cigarette ads, suggesting that had a real impact, and maybe something similar is needed here. It's a really forceful position he's taking.
Definitely sounds like it. Okay, so that's Felca's perspective. What about other influencers?
Right. Let's shift gears. We looked at commentary from Patricia Ramos. She had some quite direct things to say about Virginia Fonseca's CPI appearance.
Okay, Patricia Ramos. What was her angle?
Well, according to Patricia, Virginia wasn't there primarily to, discuss the complexities of betting. Her main goal was self-promotion.
To be talked about.
Yeah, exactly. Ser falada, ser comentada, ser ovacionada, to be spoken about, commented on, applauded. That was the vibe Patricia got, purely focused on attention.
So invoking that old saying, talk good or bad about me, just talk about me.
Pretty much, yeah. That's the impression Patricia gives. And she also contrasts the huge amounts of money influencers like Virginia make with the potential harm from promoting betting.
So highlighting that tension between profit and ethics again.
Definitely. There's a bit of sarcasm, too. She said something like, you only need, indikatoraki, just one little finger to become a millionaire through legitimate means.
Right, implying there are other ways to make big money without promoting potentially harmful things.
That seemed to be the point. And she also mentioned Virginia's stated ambition of becoming a billionaire.
Okay.
With the implication being maybe she's willing to get money from anywhere, nem que sea do joguinho, even if it's from the little game.
Suggesting a kind of relentless pursuit of wealth, regardless of the source.
That's a takeaway. It raises questions about the values being promoted, doesn't it?
It does, and Patricia seemed quite frustrated.
Yeah, it came across as disappointment, maybe even a sense of betrayal, like these influencers are potentially exploiting the very audience that made them famous.
How so? By offering them what?
Well, she mentioned Produtos ruins bad products in the past, and now this joguinho, the little game, which she clearly thinks is harmful.
So an accusation of not looking out for their audience.
A strong one, yes. Lack of responsibility. And she finished with a pretty cynical line.
What was that?
En cuanto haver platea, siempre haverá circo. As long as there's an audience, there'll always be a circus.
Oof. A bit bleak about the whole influencer-audience dynamic.
Yeah, quite pessimistic. Now, we also looked at Sarah Andrade. I have to admit, I wasn't familiar with her before this.
Okay, Sarah Andrade, what was her take? A different angle?
A bit different, yeah. Her observation was more philosophical, maybe? She said something like, O ser anda esquecido, o propósito viro artigo de luxo, y amor o virus algo que depende da oferta.
Let me translate that. Being has been forgotten, purpose has become a luxury item, and morality depends on the offer. Wow, that's quite a statement.
It is, isn't it? But the general climate, maybe.
And did she focus just on influencers?
Not entirely. She broadened it out, suggesting the verdadero circo, the real circus, isn't just the influencers. It's the wider situation with, justice, politics, the country itself.
Interesting. So seeing the influencer drama as maybe a symptom or a distraction from bigger issues?
That's how it felt.
Yeah.
It makes you think about where we focus our attention, our outrage.
Yeah. Did she have anything else?
She posed a question, asking if others would act differently if they got offered those huge deals. ¿Y si fuese conmigo? What if it were me?
A moment for self-reflection there, even though you mentioned you'd already said no to similar things.
Right. Yeah, it does make you pause for a second.
Yeah.
But she went on to suggest there are muita gente vacía, a lot of empty people out there.
Empty out.
Easily swayed by these external offers because they haven't really looked inward, which leads to, in her words, influencia sem valor, sem verdade, sem propósito.
Influence without value, truth, or purpose. That's a critique of the superficiality, maybe?
Yeah, a lack of genuine connection and responsibility in parts of the online world.
If you connect that back, it suggests this broader thing where maybe external validation, money, can overshadow deeper values sometimes.
Definitely seems possible. Okay, so should we shift now to the Cracolândia situation itself?
Yes, let's move to that context.
Right. So the thing that kicked off a lot of this was the São Paulo city government apparently clearing out Cracolândia.
Okay. And the initial media host we mentioned, Ricardo, he had a take on the reaction.
He did. A pretty dismissive one, actually. He framed the left being upset about it as being financially motivated.
Financially motivated? How?
Tied to NGOs, he suggested, needing Cracudo's crack addicts to care for, basically to keep their funding going. It's a very cynical view of why they'd be concerned.
Wow. That really highlights how polarized these discussions can get, doesn't it? Framing concern as self-interest.
Absolutely. But then you have the protesters, the crack resist group.
Right. And their main point.
Their central question, aimed at the mayor, Ricardo Nunes. Nos queremos saber cadê as pessoas da Cracolândia. We want to know, where are the people of Cracolândia?
So their focus is on the people themselves, their well-being, their location.
Exactly. They're saying they can't find anyone to help, and they're making serious allegations, too.
Allegations about what?
About violencia extremada acontecendo por parte da segurança pública. Extreme violence happening from public security forces.
Okay, those are serious claims, raises questions about the methods used and the need for accountability.
For sure. And we actually heard from someone identifying as a user.
Oh. What did they say?
They said they're being stopped from staying in the central area, asking, ¿Dónde va a identificarla no centro? ¿Por dónde nos vamos? They don't let us stay in the center. Where are we supposed to go?
That really brings it down to a human level, doesn't it? The displacement issue. Where do they go?
It's a fundamental question. It highlights that challenge. If you displace vulnerable people, what are the alternatives? Is there support?
Yeah, seems like that's potentially missing, or unclear at least.
And the protesters, they're calling for action. A grand plenaria, a big meeting to coordinate against the removals and the alleged violence.
Organizing themselves.
Yes, and they emphasize their belief that so a luta coletiva muda a vida, only collective struggle changes life. It's that grassroots activism approach.
A common strategy for marginalized groups trying to get their voices heard when they feel ignored by authorities.
Makes sense. And they ended with a really striking chant.
What was the chant?
Ricardo Nunes, cadê as pessoas que a gente precisa cuidar e não barator? Ricardo Nunes, where are the people we need to care for, not beat?
Care for, not beat. That really sums up their perspective very clearly.
It does. And looking at the whole picture, you see this stark contrast, right?
Yeah. On one side, you have this dismissal of concerns, framing them as political or financial.
And on the other, this passionate demand for humane treatment and accountability for a very vulnerable group. So wrapping this deep dive up, it's obvious we've touched on some really complex, tangled issues.
Definitely. Public health and addiction, the whole ethics of influence online, and these deep social issues around marginalized communities like in Cracolândia.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, I think, is trying to get a handle on the different motivations behind it all.
Right. You've got influencers making huge financial choices, others critiquing those choices.
Activists on the ground fighting for people's well-being.
All happening within this context of a major city dealing with big social problems.
It gives you a lot to think about, doesn't it?
For sure.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener. What does all this really tell us about the power of influence today? You know, the actual responsibilities that should come with it.
In how we as a society actually deal with really tough problems like addiction and social exclusion.
Exactly. Who's really benefiting in these situations? And who's getting harmed? Something to keep mulling over.
Yeah. Because this situation in São Paulo, it's specific, but it really feels like a snapshot of bigger, ongoing conversations happening everywhere, with consequences far beyond just one place or group.
Definitely. Important issues we'll need to keep following. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.